I think most people would agree that Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Leon Kennedy, and Claire Redfield have always been the main protagonists of the series, with all of them making multiple appearances. A lot of us have seen how they've developed as the series has gone on, but some people may not know what their lives were like before making their debut. So sit back and relax, as today I'll be going over the backstories of the main four protagonists in Resident Evil. Let's start things off with Chris and Claire Redfield. These siblings gained a close bond after the unfortunate death of their parents, which had happened when both Chris and Claire were still relatively young, but old enough to take care of themselves. Eventually they would end up going down different paths, though they never lost the bond that they had built up. Chris would end up joining the US Air Force as a pilot, where he was trained in both flying jets and helicopters. He was also recognised for his skill in hand-to-hand combat and marksmanship, which he ended up winning a contest for. This would be where he first met his good friend Barry Burton, and they would end up working in the same unit. Chris was known for speaking with conviction, and while sometimes this would work in his favour, it would also cause arguments and conflicts between him and his senior officers. Chris eventually left the Air Force, but it's unclear if he did so on his own terms. In 1996, Chris was invited to go work with STARS and ended up being appointed to Alpha Team. At a later date, Barry also made the same transition from the Air Force to STARS. Once again, Chris stood out for his skills with firearms and ended up entering more shooting competitions, this time with the Raccoon City Police Department. His career in STARS was very successful. Both him and Barry worked together to solve multiple cases. He later befriended Jill Valentine, eventually forming a very tight bond, and both considered each other to be very trustworthy. On his days off, he would often go drinking with STARS members Forrest Spire and Joseph Frost, and they became known for causing drunken disturbances in the suburbs of Raccoon City. On the 24th of July, 1998, Chris, along with the rest of Alpha Team, was sent out to search for Bravo Team, who had been investigating cannibalistic murders in the Raccoon City forest. This was the beginning of the events of the first Resident Evil, where we were first introduced to Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine, but more on her later. Unlike her brother, Claire Redfield instead went to university. While we don't know what she studied, we do know that during her time at uni, she began to show an interest in motorcycles and eventually bought and customised her own. During her breaks from university, Claire would occasionally go visit Chris, who was living in Raccoon City at the time, and during her visits, Chris taught her the basics of hand-to-hand combat and helped her improve her aim with a firearm. He also gifted his STARS-issued knife to Claire, as he preferred using his own knife, which had a larger blade. Even though Chris has a lot more experience using firearms, it was clear that Claire had the potential to handle herself well in a fight, and this would prove to be the case later down the line. In August of 1998, roughly a month after the events of Resident Evil, Chris went to Europe to carry out an investigation into Umbrella's European headquarters. After going weeks without hearing from her brother, Claire went back to Raccoon City to try and find out where Chris had gone. It was at this time, however, that the viral outbreak in the city had begun, and she was now trying to survive it. This would be where we would first meet her in Resident Evil 2. Like Chris, Jill Valentine had a military career prior to joining STARS. While serving with the US Army, she caught the attention of 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, or better known as Delta Force. She would end up spending 6 months on an operator training course, where she would be trained in counter-terrorism and would end up becoming efficient in things like bomb disposal and lockpicking. Eventually, Albert Wesker recruited Jill for STARS, and as we know from earlier, ended up becoming close friends with Chris, but also STARS pilot Brad Vickers. Even though she got along with all the members of her team, she never spoke about her experiences with Delta Force, and always kept her personal life a secret. Going off what we do know about her, however, it's fair to say she is very skilled in what she does and someone that shouldn't be underestimated. Leon never really had it easy growing up. You might be surprised to know that he was actually born into a family connected to crime. We don't know what type of crime they were involved in exactly, but one traumatic event would unfold that changed his life forever. At a very young age, Leon witnessed the murder of his entire family, with him being the only survivor. It's unclear why his family was targeted, but if I had to guess, I imagine it would have been gang related. From that point onward, Leon was an orphan. After Leon saw how the police took care of him after seeing something so terrible, he was inspired to pursue a career in the police force. He had experienced what it was like to lose people close to him, and he wanted to stop that from happening to anyone else. By age 21, Leon had graduated from the police academy and was ready to begin working. He had heard about the same cannibalistic murders that Stars were investigating and put in a request to go work at the Raccoon City Police Department. This meant, however, that he would have to move to Raccoon City, and because he had no apartment for him and his girlfriend at the time to move into, they split up. Leon spent that night drinking heavily in a motel. I also want to quickly point out that this isn't the only instance of Leon drinking heavily, as we also see it in the animated Resident Evil film, Vendetta. I get the feeling that these two instances are hinting at the fact that Leon's probably had a problem with alcohol for most of his life. He woke up late the next day and didn't set off for Raccoon City until the afternoon, but by the time he had got there, the city had already been overrun by zombies, and just like Claire, this would be where we first encounter him in Resident Evil 2. Hope you enjoyed this video diving into the backstories of the main four. Just before I go, I want to say a quick thanks to Evil Bacon for the shout out in one of his recent videos. Really appreciate it. Have a good one.